Hi everyone, I'm Patrick Foley from Labour Outlook and I'm here with Jon Trickett to talk about the cost of living crisis, amongst other things. So we'll get straight into it. Jon, the Tories have shown that they are incapable of addressing this crisis. How is this affecting your constituents and how do you feel it's affecting communities across the country at this time?
Well, because as we know, it's affecting people everywhere, working people, people who have worked and are on pensions, or people who can't work, for reasons which are well imaginable. It's very, very difficult, and increasingly so. There's a sense, I think, of real fear of what's going to come next, because already, stretched budgets from a year ago now very, very tight. And, you can see really your grocery bill going up every week or two. And so it's terrifying. And then, of course, there's the cost of heating and the rent and so on and so forth. If you're buying a house, mortgage is going up. Not that many people can afford to these days. It's an extremely difficult position that the country's now in. And of course, let's be honest, it's not impacting on the kind of people that the Tories represent, the millionaires and the billionaires and the well-to-do. It's affecting working people. And there are two parts to it. There's the price rises, but equally there's the wages and salaries which you earn, which have been held back. It's quite significant. The two things together really represent a major squeeze on ordinary folk. It's bad in my patch, but we do have a lot of poverty in my patch. But there are 16 million people, I think I'm right in saying, in the country, or 20 million it is actually, who are living in poverty, and 4 million kids. I mean, it's just not blooming good enough.
We've seen them sort of fail time and time again to actually bring about any measures to sort of directly, even in the short term, to tackle the crisis. So speaking from a Labour movement perspective, what alternative policies and measures in both the short term and the long term could we be taking instead?
Okay, well, let's just be quite clear. This isn't just like an accidental moment in history when prices are getting a bit out of hand. What's happened is a system has been created which is putting a massive downward pressure on the incomes of people who work and on people who are on benefits, whilst at the same time money's being transferred into hands of the richest in our society. And therefore, though the headlines might grab attention and you might think it's a fleeting moment, it's not. It's a historic period that we've gone into, created by, really, we call it the British ruling class, the establishment, the golden circle that runs Britain. They run it in their interests, not in the interests of ordinary people. So we need to understand that. And of course, the Tories benefit themselves and their supporters, or large numbers of their supporters, from the system which is being created and is being defended. And therefore, there is no surprise that this government, which is a government of the rich, for the rich and by the rich, is going to fail to deliver for working people, because that's not what they're there for. It's not what they're there for. It's not the system that they've created. So I think that's the central point we've got to understand now. What I think needs to be done is carefully, the forces of the wider Labour movement needs to develop the arguments, the policies, the proposals, and to build a movement to show, one, that the system can change, can be changed, and we can build a different kind of country. And secondly, to build a forceful movement which is capable of saying we are going to bring about change. We're not putting up with this any longer. So there's a big task at hand, because so many people are struggling just to get by on a day-to-day basis. They don't get their eyes onto the horizon to see that we could do things differently. So this is our central task. And above all, it's a task for the left in the Labour movement, the wider Labour movement, and in civil society and all the various organizations to make the case. And I think that is the phase we're now in.
I know you spoke at the Socialist Policy Seminar last night on public ownership and the energy crisis. Do you think that is something we should be focusing on as well, on pushing for public ownership as a sort of
well, if you think about it, let's just, when I'm describing a system, you can actually try to encapsulate it. If you think about it, first of all, look at, it's a small thing maybe in most people's lives. Twitter has now suddenly fallen under the control of the richest man in the world. Our food and our groceries are now in the hands of 2 or 3 more or less monopolies, you know, Tesco's and the others that we know the names of. If you think about our energy supply, it's fallen into the hands of half a dozen companies maximum, operating more or less like a monopoly. And if you begin to analyze the various things upon which life depends, or the way we live our lives, they generally fall into the hands of the billionaire class. And that is a big problem. So that is how I describe the system. As far as energy is concerned, which is terrifying, because people were struggling before to pay the bills, it's now really very, very difficult to see how people are going to get through the winter. I mean, essentially, it is really, you know, half a dozen companies really taking large amounts of money in profits by rising prices and handing them across to the shareholders. So I think since 2010, I think if I'm right, it's about £346 billion that's been handed over by the energy companies and then by Shell and BP, 6 or 7 big mega corporations, to the shareholders in dividends. Now, if they were in public ownership, people say we can't afford to have it in public ownership. Actually, that money, which has been handed over to private individuals, the shareholders, could be used to reduce prices, but it could also be used in a number of other ways to try to get on with the green agenda, create jobs, build a new kind of economy too. So I think that the answer isn't to muck about, you know, shilly-shallying, as I think I said the other day about an elastoplast on a gaping wound. Now's the time to say we need to change the way the system works. And that is what I think we do need to be about. By the way, people say to me, well, the British people are inherently conservative with a small c, they don't really like change. Hang on a minute. Think about the things that have happened in recent past. You know, the Scottish referendum, the Brexit referendum, Boris Johnson himself, a very strange individual, the way in which Parliament was locked down for ages trying to deal with the crisis caused by Brexit. You know, a whole series of examples where the system is failing to work anymore, and where people have said, actually, we want something different. We want change. And the biggest moment that I can think of to illustrate that there's an appetite for change, for a new system, is when Jeremy Corbyn became the leader of the Labour Party. Now, I'm not somebody who invests huge amounts of faith in single individuals, but what Jeremy did was he was able to encapsulate a moment in time when people were saying, yeah, I like the idea that we're going to do things differently in the future. I'm going to vote for this guy. That, I think, does show you that there's an appetite for change. And when you think about the situation people are in, we desperately do need change.
And on this theme, we've seen a lot of trade union action across lots of different sectors taking place in the last few weeks and months. And so with May Day coming up, what message would you have for those trade unionists, those in the labour movement and those activists who are organising against Boris Johnson?
Well, I'd like to see a strong labour movement with radical policies up and down the country in every community. And there's a sign that people are turning to the trade unions in bigger numbers than before. So there is recruitment going on. The unions need to have the courage of the convictions, and of course many of them do, and to fight the good fight, because it's often in the industrial struggle where people are demanding proper wages given what's happened to prices, where expression is given to the demand for a new kind of system. So my view on May Day is, you know, it's our day to celebrate workers everywhere throughout the world. And I think, you know, we should draw encouragement from the inspiration which led to May Day being set up. But I just want to make one point which I haven't referred to, which relates not to prices, but to the way in which our society works, because we've just supposedly come through COVID. I'm not sure we have actually, but anyway, supposedly come through COVID. Look at the people who died, apart from the people who are already sick. The people who died were working class people. People who worked in shops and retail, people who delivered in lorries and vans, people who swept the streets, the manual workers, the people who kept the country going, not the ones who stayed at home, the managerial class, the well-paid. They didn't die in very large numbers. They may have been infected, but they got through it. The people who died were what were called the key workers. Now, if we have a system which acknowledges that there are people who are key workers, you know, people who work at the local co-op, you know, either stacking the shelves or serving you, and that, they kept on going. But the wages have been held down, and now there's no prospect of proper wage rises without the industrial struggle. And I think COVID captures a lot that's wrong with our country. But of course, it's barely spoken about, but we should be talking about it because it's important to remember who kept this country going and who suffered and paid the price in ill health and sadly in some cases in deaths too. So I'm going to be thinking a little bit about all of that on May Day.